Hi, my name is Susan Woodruff. I am the daughter to Kenneth Woodruff, which is the subject to our podcast. We will refer to him from this point on as Dad, and I am the sister to David. Brenda, who is my co-host, is daughter-in-law to Dad, and she is married to Stanley, my good brother, and they reside next door. Dad is now 86 years old and has been mentally and emotionally abused by David for years, recently by his wife, Lori.
Hello, thank you for joining us for this podcast. We are doing this podcast, which we have entitled Justice for Dad, to work towards changing and improving the laws in New York State to protect our elderly people, especially when it involves our family members. There are laws to protect against child abuse, but not elder abuse. We need to change the way we see elder abuse in this state and protect our elders. Everywhere we tried to get help for Dad, we hit a stone wall because for certain issues or policies they had to have. So this needs to be looked at and updated. Susan, how about we talk about Dad for a little bit to get our listeners a little familiar?
Definitely. Well, Dad was a dairy farmer for most of his life. When he retired from farming, he became a milk inspector for NFO. Mom and Dad was married 56 years prior to her passing. They farmed it both together. Ma grew up on this road that we are currently on now. He retired 2010 to stay home to take care of Mom, who was battling with cancer. They really enjoyed the farm life that they had together. They also had 5 children, and we will talk about a little bit more of those in future podcasts.
Right. And our story really begins the day Mom Woodruff passed away, which was in April of 2012. We will get back to that shortly, but right now we think it'd be a good idea to talk about David and Lori for a minute, who we are dealing with. We feel it's important that our listeners understand the type of people we have been dealing with for so long. The words we are talking and think about when thinking of them is narcissistic sociopaths. David and Lori both fit the traits of narcissistic sociopaths. They are very scary people and try to dispose of us and Dad in many different ways over the last year or so. There are the traits they possess. They fit as a lot familiar with those definitions, which is sense of entitlement. They like to control people around them. Very manipulative, sneaky behavior. Lack of empathy. They don't really care about anybody. Arrogant behavior and attitudes. Belief that they are the only ones that matter, but play that they care about others. They exploit others for personal gain. And along with that, the jealousy plays a factor in this. The most 3 that really stand out is that they engage in deceitful actions such as lying, obsessively lying, irritability, and aggressiveness that lead to altercations, including legal matters, and a lack of remorse about hurting other people.
That is so very true. We have been dealing with David and Lori, especially over the last year, and it's been very fearful, and it's been very scary living with them. We have really pretty much been forced to live with them for roughly 10 months, and it's like living with monsters. They just do not stop.
Yes, Dad had many years of challenges with David with various things, be it unscrewing his light bulbs all the time. If we would turn them back on so he could see better, David would unscrew them again. He would turn his air conditioner off. He would threaten to kick Dad out, and he basically yelled at Dad on a daily basis. Pretty much no matter if Dad can do anything right, and it was hard to deal with. But if we flash forward, I think it's important to flash forward a little bit to the fall of 2020. At approximately September 2020 is when Lori had moved in, and from there on, things kind of were at a turning point went just from bad to worse. She had a dog that basically didn't house train. It would have pee and feces all over. She had pads down. She wouldn't change them, but there's places there was the same excrement running across Dad's floor where he walks to get his clothes or thereabouts. Wouldn't clean it up. The aide would help clean it up, but Lori wouldn't clean it up. Lori had also brought in a goat, a baby goat that needed some care, and even after the goat was better, I had asked several times to have the goat removed from the home, and they refused every time. There was goat feces and so forth all over the floor. The goat was allowed to free range all over the house, and Dad's breathing was becoming worse by the day. No matter what, they would not remove the goat. Not only was the condition of the house and the air and the filth a concern, Dad himself was not being taken care of. Dad is in need of somebody to take care of him, to as far as the bathroom privileges and to basically daily wash him. They were not doing that. I come over every day to check on Dad back in September, October-ish and all that deal, that time. And I would find Dad sitting in his recliner, which is, at the time, he was sleeping in a recliner every day for years. And issues there being, and they did not get him up. They would not clean him up. I pointed out this concern to Lori, and she agreed she would help out daily with Dad with this, but in the end, did not. So this brings us to December 28th, 2020. With all the issues that were in the house, the poor housekeeping, the floors were full of dirt, full of goat hair and feces, and the dog, etc., etc. Dad, on 28th of December, the aide had called me next door and said Dad had fallen that morning, and I said, okay, I'll be over, check him out. I went over to check him out, and while checking him, Dad tells me that he had actually fallen twice that week. And I questioned him further, and he did fall twice, and no one had contacted me, nor the hospital, nor doctors, or anything. I was not aware of it. I questioned Lori on it. She knew nothing about it. And so Dad was very weak, very lethargic, he had a bump on his head. I called the ambulance and had him taken to the hospital. They assessed him and realized he was way below his physical capabilities for his age and condition, and they had to admit him, with the following day being admitted to a nursing rehab to gain his strength back. So Dad was admitted to the nursing home, and that was December 29th. In January he was there. He contacted with someone and had COVID. Basically, a couple weeks later, he needed to be rushed to Rutland Regional again because he had breathing issues. He survived COVID miraculously, thanks to the hospital care. He came back. We sent him to another rehab after that, closer to the Rutland Hospital. And he stayed there and took him until April 7th to be released, to be strong enough. So that was January, February, March, and April, part of April, until he could come home. And during March, we had talked to Dad, and Dad knew he could not come home unless the house was clean, and he needed protection against David and Lori. By that, I mean, while Dad was at rehab, Dad had time to think during that time and realized why he turned so ill so quick in December 2020. He remembered the conditions of the house. He remembered the goat. He had asked them to remove it. Didn't matter. So he knew he was being kind of like taken down without control, and he couldn't control it. He couldn't speak up. He got tired, didn't want to fight with it. So we knew we had to take care of the house, and Susan and I knew this, and this is when Susan and I teamed up to go thoroughly clean Dad's home along with a couple of his nieces. At that point, David and Lori gave us nothing but trouble the day Susan arrived in late March. They undermined every effort we made in cleanup, from throwing away cleaning supplies to dumping dirt and debris over a nicely cleaned and mopped floors. At this time, we would like to share with you a conversation Susan had earlier today with Dad. This will help you to meet and understand Dad's view and feelings. And we feel it's important to kind of do this at this point in time.
Today our guest is Kenneth Woodruff. He is the subject of our podcast. We're going to refer to him as Dad Moving On. We're going to talk about the ordeals that he's been through, what's going on with this case, things that David and his wife has done to Dad. And you're going to hear his testimony on some of the ordeals that he's had to go through since, especially since Lori moved into the house. It was bad before. It clearly got worse once Lori moved in the house in the fall of 20. Dad, welcome to our podcast. How are you doing today?
Pretty good today.
Good. And just so our viewers know, gets to know you a little bit better, how old are you?
I'm 87 years old.
And where do you live?
Whitehall.
In Whitehall, New York, correct?
Yes.
But when did you move to Beckett Road?
About 65 years ago,
When did you move up into this house?
1991.
David was living here when you moved up here, is that correct?
Right.
How did the outside of the farm look since David had moved up here prior to you?
Well, before he moved up here, it was pretty neat.
Okay, and then what happened when David moved in?
It got pretty junky.
Now, who is David to you?
He's my youngest son.
And so he's lived with you since you've been here in 91, correct?
Right.
How did it make you feel when you got home from rehab and David was suing you for $10,000?
Well, it kind of disgusted me.
Just so our viewers understand, what type of relationship have you and David had?
A rough one.
A rough one? Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
We never agreed on much of anything.
Now, I know that we're in a legal battle right now, and I guess the main question I want to ask you is why do you want David out of the house?
Because he's a very dirty housekeeper, and I'm getting sick of fighting with him.
Okay. Anything else?
He was a pig too.
Okay, so he wasn't very clean.
No, he was not.
We're just going to talk about a little bit of things that David's done to you. Mom passed away in April of 2012. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, the day that she passed away, can you tell me what David did to you?
Well, he started yelling at me because with some of her clothes and stuff, we was going to give the Salvation Army.
He was telling you that you didn't have any right to go into Ma's bedroom and remove her things?
Yes.
Okay. You and Mom was married 57 years.
Yep.
And just so we recap a little bit here, so you and Mom were married 57 years, and this is the home that you're in now that Ma grew up in, correct?
That's correct.
So you feel like you need to do something on Ma's behalf, so you wanted to donate her clothes to charity, correct?
Right.
Then you had family members go in and pick out an outfit as well for her to be laid in, is that correct?
That's right.
And that's when David got upset saying that you had no right doing that?
That's correct.
So after 57 years of marriage, you get yelled at by David on the day your wife dies. Now, was that the only time he's ever yelled at you?
Oh, no.
Oh.
Many times.
Do you feel that since Mom passed away that he got more aggressive with his yelling?
He yelled for a long time.
And what does he yell at you about?
Well, anything that didn't agree to him, that's what he'd yell about. If I carried along with, if I didn't go along with him.
Okay, so just so I understand that if you didn't agree with him or go along with him, you would get yelled at?
Yeah, lots of times.
I know we talked earlier and you did mention that he threatened to kick you out of your own house. He's told you that you didn't need any help. You're just lazy and you could do it yourself.
Yes, he's told me that once or twice.
How did that make you feel when he told you that he's going to kick you out of the house?
Well, I thought he was getting really out of hand.
I mean, this has been going on for years.
Yes.
Okay, and what would happen if you asked him to help you do something? What was his response be?
If he was in a bad mood, he'd say, "Do it yourself."
when you asked him to do something, was he mostly accommodating, or would he not want to help you at all?
He just didn't want to help at all
Okay.
on some jobs.
How was his demeanor when you got an aide in here to help you do things around the house? How did he react to that?
He didn't react. He didn't like that at all.
So you're saying that he didn't care for the aides to come in to help you?
No.
After Mom passed away, living with David was pretty difficult. Would you make that statement?
Well, whenever you got David involved in anything, it's always hard, especially when he got his girlfriend in here.
Okay, and what's his girlfriend's name?
Well, her first name is Laura. I don't know what her last name was.
And she moved in here. Did you know about her moving in, or did she ask you if she could move in?
No,
What did David ever come talk to you and get permission for her to move in?
no, he never did. When you get at my age, you just don't have the gumption to do things you should have done.
Did you fear that he would just start yelling at you?
Oh yeah, he would have.
So you felt it'd be better just to keep your mouth shut, and or what was your thoughts?
Well, I don't know if I even had any thoughts on it.
Okay, but you didn't grant her permission to move in.
No,
Okay, and she didn't contribute to the household as far as she was here all day while David was at work, and she did nothing in the house, or did she
No.
help you out?
no, she didn't help me out.
Okay. So let's talk about some of David and Lori's bizarre behavior, especially over the last year. I know it's been very difficult for you having them still in the house. To my understanding that the police has been here a lot. How many times in the last year do you feel that the police has been here?
They called the police 15, 20 times
Over the last year?
over the last year.
And do you know what any of them were about? They calling to have you arrested, or who were they trying to get arrested every time they called?
Well, me or you?
And were we ever arrested?
No.
Okay, now we had called the police on them 6 times. And how many times were they arrested out of the 6 times?
4.
4. David was arrested 4 times?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, do you believe that he was trying to have me arrested, so knowing that if I'm out of the house, you wouldn't be able to stay because you need 24-hour care?
Yep.
Do you think that's what their goal was, to have me removed?
Oh, definitely to have you removed.
Do you feel since Lori's come into David's life that he's gotten more aggressive with his behavior?
Certainly not better.
How did that make you feel when Lori was coming in the house last summer, and every time she'd come in, she'd look at Marley and talk to Marley like we were abusing Marley by making statements such as, "Oh, I know life sucks, Marley," or "You poor thing." How did that make you feel?
Not good.
Did that upset you that she was insinuating that you were abusing your dog?
Oh, yeah.
So you feel that Lori has enhanced David's behavior since she's come in?
Oh, definitely.
And has she been a good person to you? Has she helped you out? Has she treated you with the utmost respect?
She didn't do nothing for me either.
Dad, I think that's all I have for now. Really enjoyed having interviewed you here, and you have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
I would like to state that Dad answered all these questions entirely on his own and spontaneously. He was not coached by anyone, including myself. Dad has very vivid memories that has taken place throughout the years, including since Lori moving into the house.
That being said, there were some aides coming about 3 times a week for a couple of hours. They did help out with the bathing, the sponge bathing, and so forth. In between all that, David had previously tried to get several aides fired, previous ones because that were here and being replaced, but he tried to get them fired for reasons of stealing things or turning the thermostat down, which in the end was me turning it down because we're trying to adjust it. It was way too warm. Various reasons that they just shouldn't be here, that Dad does not need them. but Dad didn't need anything in David's eyes, so it didn't matter.
Yeah, it's funny that you mention that because it seems like every time, no matter who helps Dad, they would try to dispose of them. So if you were here to help Dad, then he would do everything possible to get rid of you. He did not like Dad getting help because he felt that Dad was getting all the attention and he was not. And he's actually told that to Dad, that Dad didn't need any help. He just wants all the attention. So his goal was to dispose of anybody who helped Dad, the aides, Brenda, myself, contractors, other family members that has been here that he's threatened to kick off the property because they were on the property to visit. So this was another ongoing issue that we've had to deal with over the last year or so. Let's move on and have you get to know David and Lori a little bit better.
Yes, and with that, we'd like to share with you an audio of a conversation between David and Lori and how they discussed several things along with how Susan and myself should die.
And I still don't see how Susan Brenner had the operation done. Everybody would have to say it's disgusting.
They didn't give a shit about that. All they cared about was themselves. Yeah.
She is judged. She got problems. Both need anger management.
They need to be shot and killed. What they need.
She went around and took all them signs down.
No, I took everything down.
Oh, and there too?
Yeah.
Oh. Gonna hawk and poke in the face.
I'm sure George ain't gonna let this go. If he has to hire somebody to take her out, he probably will. Cause he said he ain't no bullshitter.
I can't believe she shot her in the street out. How stupid is she?
What you do with them?
You said you picked them up from the truck.
All those schools, yeah.
Mom made them. I'm telling I didn't shoot that son of a bitch in Brenda. I don't know what the other rooster is. The big one's mom made.
I think we packed it up right over there already. We put it in storage.
Yeah,
already.
okay.
Yeah, we put it in storage already. Cause you said leave it and I said no.
It's all, there we go again. Dad was in the hospital at
And
that
they,
time.
yeah, and they,
And this
put-
what
yeah.
they done.
pushed
This
it.
time, they put him in the hospital again.
See,
do all this
too,
shit.
when we were down there, you put that into his head that she's been forging his name right along. See, he's gonna look further into that too, because you put that into his head that she's been forging his name right along.
Well, like, was it Janet? Or someone saying, I forgot who did, but she did it all her
Yeah.
life. What's gonna end?
One quick bullet in her head. Now see, I can't believe somebody's actually got that. That was never me to be violent. She's pushed me to the point where, I mean, look at that devout Christian. Look at that sweet old lady. She lives by the Bible, and she was the one that come up with hiring a hitman.
Wow, I can remember that day as if it happened yesterday, but actually it happened on March 26th of 2021, and when I heard that audio, I was never so scared in my life. It was just amazing how people can talk about how somebody else should die.
And we were both scared, didn't know what to think. We felt we should call the authorities because this was a threat or whatever on right here on recording. And they came and there was actually nothing they could do because it wasn't said directly to us face to face. There are many other recordings similar to this, but they went nowhere because they weren't face to face, which as a precedent, I'd like to say that throughout this whole ordeal, we have learned that the laws are not in favor of the victim. They're in favor of the person doing the crime. This is only one of many encounters we had throughout several months with David and Lori, or David and or Lori, calling the police, the authorities, and trying to get us in trouble, which went nowhere because we weren't doing anything wrong. But we had several ways of being threatened. To give you an example, we would like to share with you now an actual police report from the sheriff's office from an incident on here at the house, February 5th, 2021. And this is the actual reading of the police report.
Washington County Sheriff Case Report. On February 5th of 2021, I, Deputy Paddock, was dispatched to a prior verbal domestic in the town of Whitehall. I arrived on scene and spoke with David Woodruff and his wife Laura. David was not on scene at the time of the incident, but reported approximately an hour prior to calling 911. His wife Laura was home, and his sister Susan Woodruff and sister-in-law Brenda Woodruff came and verbally attacked her. David stated that this is an ongoing issue due to his elderly father being in and out of the house with medical issues. Brenda Woodruff was described as the healthcare proxy for his father, who owns the residence located in Whitehall, New York. Brenda Woodruff lives next door to Ken. David stated that his father was in the nursing home recovering from a prior hospital visit. David stated that they wanted to press charges. I described to both parties that there was nothing criminal at this point, but I could speak to Brenda and document the incident. Laura stated that at approximately 12:54 p.m. she was home and Susan and Brenda came in to get items for David's father. Laura stated that Brenda started yelling at her because the house was in a disarray and there was goat feces in a chair belonging to her father-in-law. Laura stated that Susan started gagging and told her it smelled in the house. Laura stated she felt threatened and ran and sat in a truck vehicle until David came home. Brenda and Susan left prior to reporting officer arrival. Laura also indicated that both Brenda and Susan took pictures of the living conditions of the home. Laura stated that the house was spotless to reporting officer. There was a full-size goat observed on the kitchen table while officer was interviewing David and Laura. I advised David that since his father still owns the house and Brenda and Susan have permission to be there, they are not trespassing. I was contacted shortly after to go back to the residence because David discovered that there was a record player missing from upstairs in the residence. David reported that there was an old record player taken from the upstairs bedroom. David stated that he discovered it was missing after I had just cleared from the original complaint. David indicated that it was his mother's and that nothing should leave the residence. I advised him I would be following up with Brenda and Susan and would try and find out where the record player went. I advised him at this point it is a civil issue as all siblings have access and permission to be at the residence per his father who is still alive. I spoke with Brenda and Susan later on in the evening on speakerphone. Brenda stated that she is the healthcare proxy for Ken and her husband Stan Woodruff. Brenda stated that her and Susan went into the residence that they have always had access to retrieve items that he needed at the nursing home. Brenda and Susan stated that the living conditions are poor inside the residence and they took pictures of the goat that was living in there and the feces in a chair. Brenda stated that her husband Stan had the record player because he was restoring it. Brenda stated that it belonged to his mother before she passed, but his father was aware of such. I advised both parties that this was a civil issue between all parties involved. Both Brenda and Sue both stated that they had no physical contact or verbally threatened Laura at any time while at the residence.
So what do you think, folks? A goat on the table. It says right there, you just can't make this up.
Speaking of animals, Dad has a yellow lab named Marley. He's had this dog roughly for 3 years. He was a rescue dog, and Dad loves this dog to pieces. And David and Lori, over the last year and a half, has tried every which way but loose to steal that dog from him. It's just really, really sad. And what we want to do now is they put a sign on the house, which they had a habit of putting signs all over the house, stating rules and regulations that they thought we should abide. But one of the letters that we found that was very disturbing was a letter where Lori granted herself custody of Dad's dog. So let's take a listen.
To whom it may concern, on March 4th, 2021, at 5 p.m., I, Lori Woodruff, was granted temporary guardianship of one yellow lab named Marley, residing at the residence. Due to the involuntary abandonment from his owner Kenneth on 12/28/2020, I was granted all rights to said dog as his temporary owner, until which time Kenneth returns home. Only then will the temporary guardianship be removed. I have the right to make all medical decision concerning said dog until which time his owner returns. If said owner Kenneth does not return ownership of Marley, I will be granted full legal owner. Lori Woodruff.
This is just one of several attempts that David and Lori attempted to steal, take, remove Dad's beloved dog, Marley, from the home. Mind you, Marley is Dad's pretty much lifeline, and we lost totally without him, but they didn't care. They don't care about others. There's no empathy for anybody but themselves. Before we conclude, we have one other of many signs to share with you that was written up with them trying to rule and regulate where Stan, Susan, and I could go within the house.
To whom it may concern, on March 4th at 3:30 p.m., our attorney advised us that Susan Woodruff, Brenda Woodruff, Stanley Woodruff can only go into space of the residence that my father occupied or went. The upstairs is our private space because my father does not go upstairs. It is off limit. The downstairs is off limit. My father has been down those stairs in years. The barn garage are out of limits. My father has not been in them in years. Touching or removing any of the content of residence is considered theft of personal property, harming any animal residing in residence or on the premises will result in a charge of animal cruelty. David and Lori Woodruff.
The signs that they had around the house, we did have somebody come in and read them so we could be able to play them for you. They are read exactly as written, that no words have been changed or modified to do these readings. So with this letter, it's just one small example of how they tried to control everything and everybody on this property. You will hear in future episodes more signs, more police reports. We have so much material that they've given us to do these podcasts. Some of it, like I said, you just can't make this stuff up. This is our first podcast ever, so I'm sure we have a large learning curve on the do's and don'ts, how to put one together. So if you have any feedback or would like to give some input or some advice, we would greatly appreciate it. You can email us at justice4dad2021@gmail.com, and we will be posting this on our Facebook group, Justice for Dad 2021. You can go there and you can actually see the photos that was taken on February 5th of the spotless house that she claims it was, but it really wasn't. Before we close for this week's episode of Justice for Dad, I really would like to give a special thanks to Brenda. If it wasn't for her, Dad probably would not be here with us today. She stepped in, took action on December 28th, and she saved his life. So for that, Brenda, Dad and I love you very much, and thank you.
Susan and I want to thank you for your time and listening and any input you may have to help us improve this podcast. We will have another one next week, and we look forward to you folks listening and anything you can offer. And we hope you're enjoying